Welcome to Law and Society. So I took a little bit of time off, and it's not definitely not because there isn't anything happening. It's actually because there is so much happening that it's difficult for me to process every single bit of news, because this is just me, and try to make sense of it. But I've skipped a few days, and there have been a lot of accumulated news. So we're going to talk about a bunch of topics today. Firstly, I want to bring up the issue with Harvard, and this happened quite quickly. Donald Trump went after Harvard and went after the international students at Harvard, implementing a ban on international students at Harvard. So Harvard immediately filed a case, and then the federal court judge, immediately put a stay on the ban that Donald Trump put on international students going to Harvard. Now, the grander picture is that Donald Trump is going after Columbia for evidently their anti-Semitic slant, and I don't. Obviously, Donald Trump doesn't back it up with any sort of reality, and I think this is the time now for all educational institutions to unify and write to the judiciary and file amicus briefs when this goes to the Supreme Court, saying that we are in support of Harvard and we are in support of Harvard's protection of its international students, Harvard's protection of First Amendment rights, and the government encroaching on these is violation of the Constitution itself. So Harvard has led the way, and I hope that other universities take note and they join together and they back Harvard. The next piece of news, and I'm sure you've heard all about it by now, it's the big ugly bill that the House passed that includes cutting Medicaid substantially, cutting the SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is a food program, food stamps for people who qualify for it because they don't make enough money. You see there's a cut in the education budget, and they also slipped in this provision which takes away from the courts their ability to hold the federal government in contempt. And as it stands now, there are 3 judges who are about to or have already held the government in contempt of not following their orders to bring back people who have been denied due process of law. And then there's national security, there's an increase in national security spending and defense spending, and there is a continuation of the tax cut to the ultra-rich. And economists and experts have said that under this bill, people making $17,000 or less, which is $17,000 or less, will lose about $1,000 a year, whereas the top 1%, the richest of the rich, will make about $390,000, which they probably won't even notice. But that is taking away from the poor and giving to the rich. It's this odd reverse Robin Hood that is just, it's obscene. The New York Times said that Republicans slipped a provision into the big spending bill that would limit the power of federal judges to hold people in contempt, potentially allowing Trump and his administration to violate court orders without consequence. So you know, that's what the Republican MAGA House wants to pass through, and I hope that it never gets through the Senate, because that would be hellscape on in so many ways, from undermining the judiciary to taking away food from poor children. The breadth of this particular big ugly bill is just, it's endless. They're seeking to take away health insurance for millions of Americans, and they're doing it to give billions of dollars in tax cuts to the wealthy. That's what the New York Times says. So now we can just hope that the Democrats hold the line during filibuster and not vote, not relent, and give the 60 votes that are needed for the bill to pass, to get through to the final vote. And these are the times where you realize that, rules like the filibuster rule could works to the minority's benefit. And in this instance, thank goodness, because we have a mad king for a president who is, again, manipulating the markets. He announced yesterday or earlier today that he is going to raise tariffs on EU, on the European Union, and he was going to tariff Apple 25% if they didn't produce their phones in the United States. Tim Cook of Apple explained this by saying that, it's not just bringing the factory. It's also about the skill level and the expertise needed in building those little machines that we use, my old iPhone and the advanced machines that we use today. It requires a level of skill that China and Chinese workers have that cannot be replicated in the United States overnight. Apple intended to bring that manufacturing to China, from China to India. But Donald Trump wants Apple, and now he has extended that to all smartphones, saying that we will put a tariff on them if they don't build their phones in the United States. Not only is that going to cost these companies billions and billions of dollars to build the infrastructure and build the base of workers who are skilled enough to work in these minute, small precision applications that Apple's employees are required to know at an expert level. And then comes the cost of the phone that is being manufactured in the United States. Thousands and thousands of dollars. An iPhone will cost us thousands and thousands of dollars. Today, the most expensive one costs us over $1,000. With manufacturing in the United States, if the company is to survive, will have to cost tens of thousands of dollars. So this is him, I believe. This came on the tail of the dinner with his massive, the people who bought his meme coins, his crypto dinner, mega donors. They're not, it's just money coming into him without any oversight, because crypto doesn't have oversight yet. And he goes out and he talks to this bunch of people saying, oh, we don't have inflation, costs are way down, oil is down, none of which is true. Inflation hasn't gone down. The price of gasoline isn't going down like he's saying. At least that's not what the markets are saying. And I believe the markets over believing Donald Trump. I still believe the news organizations and the independent media over anything that comes out of Donald Trump's White House or Donald Trump. So remember, I hope someone's paying attention to who bought the minute the markets start to slide, and we keep a watch on people who keep buying as the markets slide down. And then we look at who sells right after Donald Trump announces that he's backing down from these tariffs, which I think he inevitably will. Who is selling? And what is the profit that these accounts have made? And if they're also the same people who bought when the market was tanking. And I believe that we will find impropriety there, where Donald Trump is manipulating the markets and telling people, and therefore it's insider trading. Moving to more to the legal avenue. So the Supreme Court lifted a stay, or stayed the stay of the district court that had stopped the firing of the heads of the National Labor Relations Board and I believe the National Merits Board. And the Supreme Court essentially, by staying the district court's order, thereby allowing the government to keep the heads of these independent agencies fired until the litigation is resolved. The Supreme Court, as Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson joined in the dissent in saying that it's effectively upending a Supreme Court precedent called Humphrey's Estate that gives independent agencies that are essentially created by legislation that have for-cause provisions in them for their independence, that perform quasi-judicial or quasi-executive functions, and they are therefore, those employees cannot be statutorily fired without cause and without proper notice, as provided in the statutes that created these institutions. And the dissent says that by just staying the district court's stay of the firings, the court has essentially overturned what is a 90-year-old precedent, 9-0. And we know this court has no problem upending the precedent. And we heard Justice Sotomayor in the oral arguments in the birthright citizenship case about why these cases shouldn't apply to other cases in terms of how far the application goes. Like, would this ruling only be limited to the National Labor Relations Board or also go to other independent agencies? So the majority, to push sort of stave off that argument, says that, of course, the Federal Reserve is not one of those organizations, one of those entities that the president can exercise power over. It is, by its tradition and history, has always had independence from the executive. And they said that sua sponte, like nobody told them to say that. It wasn't part of the case. It wasn't part of any arguments. It was just the Supreme Court saying in this independent agencies NLRB ruling that Federal Reserve is a different story, but effectively giving a hint that they are going to come up with a new rule of whether the president can fire independent agencies' heads that will essentially overturn Humphrey's estate, which gives these independent agencies the ability to do their jobs. So that hangs in the balance, and the message coming from the Supreme Court isn't good in that regard, because if they are willing to throw away a nearly 100-year-old precedent in a emergency shadow docket ruling where they don't address the merits of the case, and just by the means of a stay, or just by means in the birthright citizenship case of limiting the jurisdiction, despite the fact that in both cases there is statutory, constitutional, and judicial precedents that would disfavor the government, the Supreme Court seems to be siding with the government, or at least it has in the NLRB case. I don't know how big the ruling will be for the birthright citizenship case, whether it's going to address the merits or whether it's going to limit the jurisdiction or not. But I hope that the Supreme Court does not limit the jurisdiction. I hope that it picks up Justice Sotomayor's call that underlying issue is the proclamation is in violation of constitutional provisions and or statutory provisions and or judicial precedents from the Supreme Court, and it requires to whatever order that is being challenged, whatever executive order or proclamation is being challenged, that should be put on hold, because that is the thing that is upending the status quo. But in this region, independent agencies are ruling, the Supreme Court essentially is saying that we are willing to be compliant on 100-year-old precedents, and dealing with independent agencies will look at it all anew. And that is, I think, what a radical Supreme Court would do. And so, I mean, even in the birthright citizenship case, I think that I don't see them ruling on the merits, despite Justice Kavanaugh concurring with the opinion and saying that the Supreme Court should do it all and deal with the legal issues and do it expeditiously. So with that, there's one last nugget of news that I saw before coming on to talk to you, which is Donald Trump's administration has denied North Carolina a revival of its federal aid under FEMA from the hurricanes that it sustained. I forget the name of the hurricane. There's so many now. I think Helen, was it? Anyway, so this state that has voted for Donald Trump 3 times just got betrayed by Donald Trump's regime for the cleanup of the aftermath of this storm from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which Donald Trump has said he wants to undo. So this is the beginning of that undoing, people. With that said, I won't talk anything else because it's already too many topics. I'll come back at another time and talk to you about more legal proceedings that are happening. I'm staying away from the budget bill because it would be infuriating to me on so many levels. And I think I'm not really well-versed on everything budgetary and economic. Constitutionally, I have some working knowledge. Everything else, it's just my opinion. I don't want to say something that I end up saying that is incorrect or that is factually incorrect. So anyway, with that said, take care of yourselves. Please watch out for one another. And before I go, I want to warn you again, go to the executive orders page of the White House and read the executive orders from April 28th. There are 2 executive orders, which are essentially police state proclamations, and we are seeing them being played out and tested with the arrest of Representative McIver, the arrest of Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, the charging of Judge Dugan in Wisconsin. These are test cases, just like sending a couple of hundred Venezuelan migrants to an Ecuadorian, Salvadorian prison, and then to South Sudan without due process of law, despite there being more than one court order saying this is illegal, despite the Supreme Court telling them that they are owed due process of law, but not directly. And I maintain that the Supreme Court needs to take the reins and directly tell Donald Trump to bring these people back. That they tell Donald Trump that you cannot go after people without providing them due process of law. That is a constitutional violation. So I couldn't not talk about that. With that said, check out that police order thing and you'll know the emergency that I'm talking about. We should be worried. All right? Take care, everybody.